Holy smokes. Is Ripple XRP completely replacing the SWIFT system soon? We're going to check into some information that's going to bring this to your mind and maybe even answer the question for you. Before we get to that, would you like to earn 100, 200, 500 extra dollars a day? We're going to look at BTCC and the Decent Wallet and be right back. How would you like to earn an extra 100, 200, or even $500 a day? Even more than that. I have many friends that are earning money every single day trading futures on BTCC. It's a simple process. And even if you don't want to learn how to trade, you can follow a trader on the site and let him do the trading for you, and you will earn according to his trades. Sometimes I follow All the Money by Q, and his trades earn me money. He has a 93% success rate, and he earns a great percentage. So even if you don't know how to trade, there's a way to make money. But I suggest learn how to trade, earn you some extra money on BTCC. It's easy. You do not have to KYC, and you don't have to use a virtual private network. This is a wonderful site. They've been around since 2011. Get them a shot. Also, when you earn that extra money, you can store that in your Decent Wallet. The Decent Wallet was not affected by the recent XRPL debacle where the back door of many wallets was opened and there was a breach. So Decent Wallet was not affected by that. Decent Wallet is as safe as you keep your seed phrase. It's a wonderful product, and you can get the discount by using the link. It is the only way you can get an affiliate discount is to use an affiliate link. So that link that's popping up at the right side of the screen is the one that you use. You will also get free shipping. Pick you up a Decent Wallet today. Secure your assets. If you don't have them stored in a wallet and sitting on an exchange, then you're at risk. So pick you one up today. Hey, thanks for looking at that. It's one way that we support our channels. That's important to us. We hope that these things work out for you. Man, today, Max, this information, replacing the SWIFT system, that's going to mean a whole lot for XRP and a whole lot for the Ripple system. They got railways all over the world already. It wouldn't be that hard to do. And then this extra information that's coming out really looks like a clincher on this idea.
I agree. And on top of that, it's really eye-opening. We have been talking about this whole notion of potentially Ripple replacing Swift. Jed McCaleb actually mentioned it a while back, even when he first went to Stellar. But is this an actual thing? Is it going to happen soon? I think, if anything, the answer is yes. And I know we've been talking about this for years now. So if this is your type of content and you appreciate it, we kindly ask you to consider smashing that like. It does obviously help the channel. Let's pull this up. Once again, shout out to our brother in community, Smoke Dog. What does he have? Well, here it is. He mentioned specifically this. He says, remember, Morgan Stanley has stated that adopting a Ripple-like payment system could shorten settlement periods, speed up transactions, and reduce the risk of fraud. Quote, Morgan Stanley considers Ripple to be the leading international payment alternative to SWIFT. Now, this is documented according to Smoke, but again, here's the highlight. And if anything, a little bit of the citation, because some of you guys want that. This comes from Review of Banking and Financial Law. In the highlight, it mentions specifically this, like it was mentioned. Morgan Stanley has stated that adopting Ripple-like payment system could shorten settlement periods, speed up transactions, and reduce the risk of fraud. You do plain as day see that. A little bit further down in some of the references and so on, you see specifically on the very, very bottom, the citation actually comes also in the reference from BitBeat, where it states Ethereum opens its frontier for business, originally published in the Wall Street Journal all the way back to July of 2015. And also from Morgan Stanley themselves, which states this whole thing of Global Insight, blockchain in banking, disruptive threat or tool. I like the idea about tools because tools means utility. And if you want to check that out for yourself, you can get the PDF. It comes from blockchain.com/docs, Morgan Stanley blockchain report PDF. All right, let's jump into a little bit more of what Smoke has in that regard. And I think this is really cool stuff. So we will now connect it to this. Actually, Smoke will come back a little bit after this. Some of you guys have seen this interview, and shout out to XRP Daily, but this pounds it home because when you see this interview, I remember watching it of Lewis Jackson and Ron Cunningham. Well, that was a deep dive in itself, but it's this clip that pounds home everything. And like it says, Lewis Jackson and Rob Cunningham, ex Morgan Stanley consultant, who's on the right, discuss XRP tokenization, emerging liquidity crisis that could be, I think, actually, we're already at it. But Rob was extremely articulate with his words, and his explanation on said subjects was at above par. Quote, XRP Ripple/RippleNet provides a technology that clears, detoxes the system, and takes away the 5% or that 5% and takes it down to, for example, 0.5%. It says, you're darn right. The powers that be have been running as incumbents and hoarding all this wealth with this system that has accumulated 90% of the world's wealth into the hands of the less than 1%. You can bet your behinder they're going to sue Ripple. Well, if anything, that already happened. Once a liquidity crisis happens, XRP will be utilized on a grand scale. Some people are wondering, will that happen after regulations? Will we see tokenized debt in response to a liquidity crisis? Will we be off to the races? I'm not rooting for the doom and gloom of countries, but listen to this perspective. This is 2 minutes and 20 seconds. We'll come back here in a bit for some summary of the analysis with the one and only Will Fix. Here we go.
And XRP is the container ship, if you will, that allows people to put things of value in it. And then with a click of a button through the quantum technology and cryptography and all of these brilliant minds that have come together, it allows value to transport itself around the world instantaneously, safely, and securely without any permission slips, without all the high fees that the bankers used to own. And it's done in an environment, Lewis, where it's not, yes, Ripple and RippleNet is connecting banks and helping the cross-border payment flows on the macro level take place from person to person, entity to entity, nation to nation, corporation to corporation, in a real-time 24/7 basis. But it's going to take 75 or 80% of the cost out. It's going to take the politics out. It's going to take the private ownership of, think about this. Every time money is moved the world over, 4 or 5 big banks own that, currently own that distribution system. And the average cost is anywhere from 5 to 8% all in, domestic and international. Every time we send a wire, move money, make a payroll, swipe our credit card, you throw all the numbers in, you throw in trillions and trillions of dollars. And every single time money is moved, let's just call it 5%, goes to 4 banks. Goes to the friction in the system.
Yeah.
Well, friction is bad for us, it's good for them. They don't want to lose the friction. We want to clear the friction out. So if XRP and RippleNet provides a technology that clears, that detoxes the system and takes away that 5% down to 0.5%, you're damn right the powers that be that have been running as incumbents and hoarding all this wealth, this system that has accumulated 90% plus of the world's wealth into the hands of less than 1%, you can bet your ass they're going to sue Ripple.
Those are some powerful words, to say the least. Now, guys, gals, we get it. Before we even started this outline, some of you guys are thinking, mentions a lot about Ripple, but what about specifically XRP? I want to get some of your thoughts before we connect that and solidify if Morgan Stanley specifically mentions XRP. But again, some of your thoughts in regard to this interview with an ex Morgan Stanley professional, to say the least, Mr. Will Fix.
Yeah, he's got a great perspective, being in the position that he was in, and he did a good job describing what XRP offers. So Ripple offers the railway. XRP is offering the easy way to package up value, send it across the land, and in seconds. Now he's focused on, sounds like at the very end, on if Swift is going to sue Ripple, but I think that's probably going to not be the case, because um, the other things he mentioned, because I don't see how Swift could say that they own the right for banks to do that, and that banks don't have free choice, but they most certainly have free choice. And the other thing that I like that he mentioned, that he was talking about, without the political influence, the United States has used the SWIFT system, as a tool of controlling countries. If we don't like what they're doing, we just cut them off from world trade. When this goes to XRP and Ripple, that's ended. That's going to be, it's going to be more like free trade, and irrespective of what the countries are doing, and they're not going to be controlled. And I think that's a better situation. I don't think it's good for the United States to use the dollar and weaponize it. So when you add and couple to that XRP, RLUSD, and all the stable coins, and the regulations of the stable coins being backed by U.S. treasuries, we have kind of a reintroduction of the dollar to the world without it having the governmental controls on it. So there's more freedom. So I think it's going to re-inspire, the world to be okay with the dollar, and kind of erase some of the negative attitude, that's going on from it. But as far as a lawsuit from Swift, I don't think so, because Swift XRP is actually not against Swift. It's talking about helping Swift. So the idea there is that Swift would work with Ripple to get Ripple and XRP implemented to do, and transfer funds all the way around the world. So this would be, I see it more as an environment of the way Ripple has approached this in XRP, of working with the Swift system.
Yeah, I feel as though it's not replacing necessarily Swift, but Swift will be doing an upgrade. And, a lot of people don't necessarily feel as though it's the case. And with that said, we're going to address that. So what do I have? Well, we want to discuss a little bit more about this from this topic, and, address, does Morgan Stanley specifically mention not just Ripple, but XRP? Hey guys, we're ahead of you on that. All right. So let's get into what we have in that regard, and let's pull it up. As you can see right here from Smoke, it says this. And what is it? Well, he points out that Morgan Stanley considers Ripple to be a leading international payment alternative to Swift, checkmark. But there's also this Morgan Stanley document. In the document, quote, XRP system is more efficient than Bitcoin and is closer to what traditional banks do today, checkmark. Morgan Stanley is aware of the bigger picture. All right, can I zoom in and show you what we're referencing here? Well, the answer is yes, because we already showed you basically the first part of the screenshot, which is on the left. Let's show you the right side. On the right side, if you're wondering about it, it gets good because, again, as I always point out, it's a slogan of mine by now. Blow it, mash it, stick it and stew. Maybe I should make some merch that says advisor.morganstanley.com. There's your citation, okay? And it mentions specifically this. Let's go down to it. All right, there's the highlight. It says, basically, right below that whole thing about consensus protocol, it says, while energy intensity data does not exist for each, we, as in Morgan Stanley, note that Boom, XRP's consensus protocol system is comparatively much more efficient, of course, than Bitcoin's proof of work. All right, we get it. The next part mentions, though we would add that Ripple have created a payment system that requires a centralized intermediary to check transactions, so it isn't directly comparable to Bitcoin system, closer to what traditional banks do today. All right, and of course, above that, I forgot to highlight that, where it says, they do the compare and contrast with, for example, Bitcoin's proof of work, and of course, how it takes 3 to 5 seconds, which, by the way, with finality, right, for the XRP ledger. Okay, so you get an idea of how that all works. And again, the citation comes from advisor.morganstanley.com. That speaks volumes about if the whole thing of XRP is there. It's definitely there. All right, this is the final piece of the puzzle before we kick it over to Will Fix for some closing thoughts, because some of you guys are going to be part of that crowd, and that's okay, right? We're all learning different things and have different perspectives, but you're going to say, yeah, Max, guess what? Swift, I think, is shifting from messaging to managing transactions. Apparently, Smoke Dog agrees with you. He points out that Swift is moving beyond its role as a messaging network. With the new transaction manager, it now manages payments from start to finish. Checkmark. TM replaces the old point-to-point system with a centralized process. It creates a transaction copy from the first message and updates it as the payment progresses. This keeps the data accurate and easy to track. TM will be mandatory for all Swift users. I mean, think about that for a moment. It makes payments faster, more reliable, and easier for banks. So this part about mandatory, I mean, again, ISO 222, Swift created ISO 222 in 2004. Ripple XRP, technically not XRP, but Ripple started off in 2004. I think that's more than a coincidence. And what about the shift? You guys have seen some of these videos. First one was with Will. Second one was with Channing. Remember how we talked about not just a flip of the switch, but the shift of the switch? So the shift is possible through new fintech collaborations and support for digital assets. Swift can now interact with blockchains and move tokenized money, including stablecoins and CBDCs. All right, so Swift, is it no longer just a messaging service? I mean, draw your own conclusion. But whatever the case be, it's becoming a global transaction manager. So what does he have in that document as reference here? And I think this is big enough. It says, part of its migration, Swift plans to introduce a central transaction manager, which is called TM, and that's going to replace the point-to-point messaging that's currently in use. All right, next page says what? Well, on this one, I'll blow it up a little bit bigger. And on this one, it says, as we scroll further down in the documentation, it says API channel. The industry is moving from a purely messaging world to one where Swift is going to enable APIs, here's a little bit bigger, to be used for payment processing. All right, guess what, everybody? I think Quant needs their flowers on that one, because we know how many times Quant was invited to Sibos, and Sibos is a Swift event. So it says this opt-in only, and there is no mandatory action for the end user to take. This is why I point out so many times that Quant Network is the orchestrator of ISO 222 through its standard of TC 307, the Quant Network standard. I think this is major, and on top of that, what else do we have? Does it mention Swift? Does the citation come from Swift? That's all I need to know, Max, because if you don't show this to me, you're just fluff. You look like Fluffy. I've seen the comments of some of you guys, and that's okay. I'm cool with that. But, is this fluff? I don't think so. I don't think it is at all, because at the bottom part, what do you see? You see, for one, this. Zoom in. At the core of our DLT solution, or I should say solution, is the DLT and smart contract layer, which maintains consistent records of transactions. And at the bottom, there it goes. There you have it. You have Digital Asset Network. You have Swift, Transaction Managing or Manager Simulator. And does it mention ISO 222? Of course. They're the ones that originally introduced this. Mention specifically the wallet below that. Again, think about Quant with Over Wallet. Think about smart contracts, Swift connectors. So, of course, XRP has their own place in the mix. I think he was stellar. I think anything that has to do with ISO 222, as highlighted there, and this other part, sign a blockchain message. To me, this all adds up with the research. Everything makes sense here, to say the least. And with that also said, again, I just got to get your closing thoughts on this, Will. I think we just brought the receipts, and so did, obviously, our brother Community Smoke. Your thoughts?
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to point something out. You know, Swift, when we say replace completely replace the Swift, there's the Swift system operated by Swift. But the Swift system is the old system that we're talking about being replaced. Will Swift still be an entity that's performing, you know, some of these transactions? I do think so. But like Max was just saying, using what? So it won't be using the old Swift system. It'll be using the new technologies. So if there was some confusion on whether Swift is going to be replaced or not, you can see how people get confused. The Swift system's getting an upgrade. They're changing their own system. They've implemented ISO 20022 to improve their system. And then in addition to the ISO communication standards are also the new technologies of digital transfer of assets in seconds. So what do we come down to? It comes down to, of course, they're going to use a faster system that's to move the money because they're going to have accurate communications now with the ISO standards. So just changing the ISO standards doesn't mean that the money's moving faster. So they're implementing, ISO is implementing the standard of communication here in a few months as a requirement. Extra on top of that is where Quant's going to move in with the different companies can all be used, and probably the Swift system's going to be able to offer all of these different systems for the world to transfer their money, and then it'll be a brand new Swift system. So I just wanted to point that out. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It always makes sense. I love your summaries. That's why we team up, right? So, shout out to you, brother, for that. I do appreciate it. Hey, guys, listen, I think, if anything, there might be a new analogy moving forward. You guys have heard the one of, you have a Swiss watch. Well, what about running efficiently in the Swift system? What would that be through? I think it is your Ripple XRPs. So, again, glad to bring you guys this type of content. Hey, simply do us a solid if you listen to the entire outline and type in this key term or word, and I'm going to give it to Will. What's going to be the code word if everybody listened to the entire outline, Will?
The code word, Swift.
And we'll know that you listen to the entire outline. On behalf of myself and the brother Will Fix, know what you have, know what you hold it. The research trumps flood 110%. We will see you on the next one.